how I was almost trapped in an arranged marriage. I grew up in a cult that believed, among other things, that women were the property of men and children were the property of parents. As an unmarried daughter, I was essentially a cherished slave. I ran the house, meal planned, cooked, and even homeschooled my youngest siblings, all while trying to homeschool myself through high school. Having grown up this way, I didn't know the law would have been on my side if I had decided to defy my parents and move out when I turned 18. My parents constantly reminded me that until they gave me away to a husband, I was still their child and would obey them as the mouthpieces of God in my life. One day, my parents told me they had received a phone call from another family we knew. Their oldest son, guy number 1, had noticed me and wanted permission to court me. Per protocol, the parents would talk to each other, then each talk to their kids and arrange the whole thing. My mom beamed with pride, but I thought about it for a bit and said I didn't want to do it. Her smile disappeared, and she cried, "What? Why?" I gave her my reasons, which I thought were good ones, but she wasn't satisfied. She told me I was not allowing God to work in my life, and that I should just obey them and trust that God's will would be done. Being the good girl I was, I relented and said yes. Then followed a week or two of awkward family gatherings between our two houses, because this version of courtship never allowed the couple to be alone together. I tried to ease the tension by telling funny stories and encouraging other family members to talk, but only received stern rebukes from his mother, who very clearly did not approve of me. Once, she said, "We don't believe in practical jokes, so we are not impressed by that story." I mumbled that I wasn't trying to impress them, and they could talk about anything they wanted, but no one did. Another time, I was alone with his mom in the living room, and she stated, I only had 2 requirements for the girl he chose. 1, that she came from a good family, and 2, that she knew her Bible. You have both of those, so I'm not going to say anything. I was confused at feeling so rejected when I didn't even want this in the first place. I mean, really, who was courting whom? Then I got a job offer as the church receptionist, and my parents told me his parents had called them again and said they did not approve of women working outside the home and didn't want me to take the job. We believed the same way, except it was after the woman was a mother. Before she had kids, it was up to her father or husband whether she could work elsewhere. This being a strange situation where my father allowed it, but the guy I was courting didn't, my parents told me to call him and get his permission too. I thought that phone call went well. He basically said he was not my husband yet, and I should follow my own family's rules. He didn't mind and was okay with it, so I happily accepted the job. The next day, my parents told me his parents had called and canceled the whole relationship. It felt weird to get dumped without ever hearing from the guy dumping me, but it solved my problem. I moved on a little confused and definitely not in the mood for anyone else to court me. 2 years later, at 19, I still wasn't married, shocker, and his family thought that meant God was saving me for him. The whole scenario repeated itself, but this time, my dad insisted that the guy court him first so he could decide if he was even good enough for me before my heart got broken again. My dad told them that until he made a decision one way or the other, he did not want any of them to contact me or tell me what was going on. The guy decided no contact couldn't possibly mean letters, so he wrote me a 5-page apology for dumping me 2 years before, confessing that he had been falling in love with me and wanted to know if it was worth his time to even get to know my dad. My parents saw his name on the envelope and confiscated the letter before finally deciding it was too late and explained the whole thing to me. I was honestly insulted that a guy I had barely seen in 2 years would say he loved me but doubted if it was worth his time to follow my family's requirements to court me, especially after the last time he tried it. His family made me feel like trash. We agreed to meet at a local restaurant and discuss the terms of the relationship and decide if we even wanted to try it again. I sat on one side of the table with my parents on either side of me. He sat on the other side with his parents on either side of him. It felt like we had lawyers. His dad immediately started yelling at my dad for denying his son, saying it was so obvious that I wanted this and he was holding me back. My dad is a quiet man, and he sat there like an angry stone while this man yelled in his face in the middle of the restaurant. It got so heated and embarrassing that the guy who liked me excused himself to the bathroom to throw up. While he was gone, his dad said that if we didn't accept his son, there might never be another guy to come along and marry me. This made me laugh because I wasn't that desperate to accept the first guy who asked just out of fear that no one else would. I didn't care if I ever got married, though I didn't dare tell anyone that. The evening ended with an agreement to pick up where we left off. We thought this meant more courtship, but they thought it was an agreement to get engaged since they believed courtship had already been done. The misunderstanding became clear a few days later when another guy friend, guy number 2, emailed my dad to ask permission to court me. My dad suggested I tell guy number 1 and ask if I could stay friends with someone I had rejected. Guy number 1 came up with what I thought was a good plan. My dad would tell guy number 2 that I was already courting someone else, and then I could introduce him to some of my other friends, hoping he would leave on his own. I thought it was brilliant, and my dad spent the evening writing a tactful reply to guy number 2. Guy number 1 was now aware that I had male friends. His family believed guys and girls could never be just friends, so to them, I was essentially cheating on him with 20 other guys. The next morning, 6 days after I had agreed to this courtship, he called and asked my permission to ask my dad's permission to propose to me. It was the lamest over-the-phone proposal ever. He said he loved me, and we didn't have to get married right away, but that I would be his and have a ring on my finger so no one could take me away from him. I told him I was flattered, but couldn't say I loved him back. It had only been 6 days, and I hadn't decided how I felt about him yet. His voice changed instantly. He angrily snapped, asking if I was still talking to guy number 2. I was shocked, having never seen this side of him before. That's why it should take longer than 6 days to find a spouse, kids. I explained that my dad had just replied to guy number 2, and I hadn't had a chance to introduce him to my friends yet. He said, that wasn't the plan. We agreed you wouldn't talk to him anymore. I clarified that I was only doing what he told me to do, and that we were not engaged yet. I talked to many guys, but it didn't mean anything romantic. We were just friends. His voice quieted down but still sounded bitter as he said, well, if you can't agree to not talk to any other boys and only talk to me, maybe we shouldn't call this courting right now. Maybe we shouldn't, I replied. We agreed I would take a week to think about it and call him with my decision. Marry him and forsake all my male friends, or end the relationship for the second time. I told my parents what happened, and they tried to convince me to just do what he wanted. I finally yelled at them for the first time in my life that I was not going to marry anyone I did not love. My dad was angry, but my mom sent me to my room and said we could talk about it later. I had a week, after all. I was very sad. I considered it only because my parents insisted it was God's will, and I wanted to do what God said. But this family seemed even more strict than mine, and I would miss all my old friends. There was much to think about. An hour later, I got 2 calls from guy number 1's mother, which I let go to voicemail. I didn't want to talk to her then. Next thing I knew, my little brother came up holding the house phone, saying it was guy number 1's mom, and she demanded to talk to me. She scolded me for a long time, accusing me of cheating on her son and claiming he had called off work because he was worried sick over calling me and proposing. She almost called me a harlot for talking to so many guys while I tried to explain I wasn't in a relationship with any of them. Guy's mom, you cheated on him. You are in a relationship with every person you meet. Me, but not every relationship is a romantic one. Guy's mom, between guys and girls, yes? For example, my husband is my best friend, and I would never talk to other men, and neither would your mom. I honestly thought better of her than that. She demanded to know why I needed 7 days to pray about whether to marry her son. Guy's mom, God doesn't take that long to answer prayer. It sounds like you already know how you feel, and you're just too scared to say it. Me, look, your son agreed to let me have a week. Guy's mom, well, let's not be too hasty. I thought, who's being hasty? I hung up the phone and threw it across the room. My mom heard me and came to see what was wrong. When I told her everything that horrible woman said, I stated firmly that I never wanted to see anyone from that family again. She called my dad, and he was angry about me being accused of being a harlot, but told me I wasn't allowed to decide until the week was up because that was what I had agreed to. I silently told myself they could all think what they wanted, but I knew my answer was no, and it would still be no a week from now. He called the family back and told them they were not to contact me in any way, shape, or form for the whole week. They were angry, but they never contacted me again. Our courtship looked more like dating than anything else and made many people upset, but we didn't care. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary and have 3 sons. I feel like I was rescued.